The more you talk about this too, I would assume that this is one of those like necessity businesses that can't tank, because I'm even thinking during the pandemic, like grocery stores couldn't stop. You know, a lot of stuff stopped.
Yeah.
But water still had to get delivered.
Yeah.
Food still had to get to a grocery store.
100%.
So freight brokers were still working.
Freight brokers are still working. And like I said, I mean, it's a recession-proof industry. And simply because people always need goods.
Yeah.
People always need clothes. People always need bathroom supplies. There are certain things that no matter what happens, so long as humans are existing on this planet, that they're going to have to need to be able, or have to be able to use based on just being a human being. And that's food, drink, things like that.
What's up, world? Welcome back to the Tuned In with Tony podcast. And I have an excellent episode today for anybody that is looking to get into a whole nother career, something that you can actually do from the comfort of your home that you probably thought was for only people at a certain caliber was actually something you could do. And that is the world of freight brokering. So today's guest, we have Victor Mason here from Freight Broker Business Academy. He's been a freight broker for a while now on the corporate side and the entrepreneurial side. So I'm looking forward to just picking his brain, getting a lot of questions for him. So welcome to the show, Victor. How you doing?
I appreciate it. Everything is going very well.
That's what's up. What's up. So tell us the first thing, like what actually is freight brokering?
So freight brokering, in a sense, is that you're just an intermediary, right? So you have a shipper who you're contracted to cover their shipments. And what you do is they will contract it at a certain rate, and then you're going to subcontract that to a trucker, and then you're going to keep the difference, and that's the profit, and that's how the $50 billion industry actually
Got you.
is.
So but why would people or truckers need a freight broker when they probably want to keep the money? Where does freight brokering even come into the mix?
Well, the reason why freight brokers exist is because the market of trucking is so robust, and there's so many different lanes.
Yeah.
And so even when you're talking about a shipper, it would cost them so much in staffing as opposed to paying the difference in margin to have to staff for lanes all around the country. So as an example, somebody like
Let's break it down. What is a lane?
So a lane is going to be from point A to point B.
Yeah.
So that would be what would be considered a lane. So if you look at a company like, let's say like Coca-Cola, if you think about all the places that you can get Coca-Cola, right? If you go to California, you can go into a gas station and get a Coca-Cola.
Right.
If you go to Alaska, you can go to a gas station and get Coca-Cola. China, all over the world, right? So then the question is how does it get there? And that's what a part of their supply chain is. So if you really think about the totality of it, how easy would it be for them to just have a few people to be able to have it go all over the world? And it's not possible. So they have to have a broker like me who's able to route all of these trucks all over the country.
Yeah. So when it comes to the broker, right? So just so I can figure out, let's just figure it out. So we always see trucks on the highway, right?
Yeah.
So when those trucks are on the highway, is there not like the business owner who's probably getting like his own sales and then he's just telling where to go? Or is it more like freight brokering is just like a convenient service so that they just don't have to do it? Because I'm trying to just figure out like where the freight broker really just fits in.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, so there's two parts. So one, it is a convenient service for people that would prefer to just have somebody else do it, because the way that I operate is with my customers is I'm like, hey, I missed to set it and forget it.
Yeah.
You tell me what you need done. Tell you when it's done.
Right.
And then I'll send you an invoice, right?
Yeah.
And that's obviously the sweet spot where we want to operate. But on the other end of that, a lot of these business owners, they don't know how to operate, how to negotiate with truckers. They don't know the market or what they should be paying, what the dimensions are, what are the regulations that need to happen, what the weights are. And so they rely on experts in the industry to be able to fulfill all of their orders and be able to deliver and distribute to all of their different lanes and all their destinations around the country.
So would you say it's like a time saver for the company?
Oh, 100% is a time saver.
Yeah. So for you, I've seen a lot of like your content when it comes to freight brokering, and you posted something about like, it was called Fire Me, right?
Yeah.
So, there's mixed emotions when it comes to the freight brokering.
Yeah.
Like, why is that? Because I get it. Is it just one of the things like people who need it get it, and then people who like, see that you guys are like charging a fee, they're just like, I don't like it. Like, where does that animosity come from in the trucking world?
Yeah, that's funny, and that's a good question, because where that animosity truly comes from is because they see, because I will preface it by saying this. There are a lot of different brokers, right? And so a lot of times people's experience with brokers are dictated by their individual experience, and they don't take into account individual agency. Because there's so many freight brokers in the world, me as a freight broker is going to be different than a kid that is in Idaho or that just got out of college in New York. And just in our disposition, in our demeanor, and how we're going to treat you, right? Because my personality is my personality, whereas he might be disrespectful about saying like, hey, I need you to have this here on time. And so for me, I'm intentional about that type of communication with my truckers, because I want to have a good relationship with you, so that you can give me good rates, right? And so a lot of them don't factor in, but a lot of the animosity comes because they know that there is a $51 billion industry that truckers believe should be in their pocket. But the truth of the matter is a lot of truckers, they don't know business. They know truckers. They know trucking. They know driving. They're willing to get on the road, and they're willing to put in the work, right?
Yeah.
But then they don't know the business side of it. They don't know how to communicate with customers. They don't know how to price. A lot of the things that your traditional business would need as a service from a provider or from a vendor, your mom and pop's trucker, your individual trucker, just simply can't provide that service. And it might be that they're rough around the edges, or it could be that, that's just their personality.
Yeah.
But that is what drives the need for brokers. But that's a lot of why truckers are upset about.
And in reality, though, because I mean, like you said, right, just going off of like optics, I had an uncle, like they like to drive, right? Do they really even want to get into the weeds of selling and negotiating and talking, or they just want to drive and collect the check? So it kind of seems like there's an area for both, even though there is animosity.
100%, because some people have no interest in cold calling. They have no interest in cold calling. They have no interest in talking to any customers. They just send me my paperwork. I'll drive from point A to point B, and then I'm going home right after that.
Right.
Because there's a whole nother side of freight brokerage other than just driving and dispatching loads. I mean, there's accounting. I mean, there's a lot of different things just in terms of customer service and the totality of what the anatomy of a total load is. That is completely unique to what they're used to.
Yeah, because when you kind of think about it, it's like you've got the truck driver who's just used to, like, what's the term you guys say, OTR, on the road?
Over the road. Yeah.
Over the road.
Yeah.
And they're always driving, right?
They're always driving.
If they were to do their own sales, they wouldn't have time to drive. So it would probably cut out of their money too, right? If the trucker was doing their own sales, right?
And I think that's two parts of that. Yes, that could be true. But a lot of the sales and the customer relationships, you can do that and be dispatched by the customer as opposed to going to the broker. So I think that's probably a limiting belief to a lot of the different truckers, because the truckers think that they can't do the sales. But yes, you can, because all I'm doing, my contact with my customer can be limited in terms of what your load is, because, I mean, the customer tenders me the load, and I'm just sending it to you.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's just as simple as receiving an email.
Yeah.
Right? And I mean, and obviously you have to be staffed to be able to deliver updates so that, you can deliver a satisfactory experience. But, that it is a multifaceted, what's the word that I'm looking for?
Like a multifaceted, like what type of career or something, or what?
There's a lot of different moving parts that are involved in the load.
Right.
And so, and a lot of, if you haven't mastered those individual parts, I mean, you're going to have an issue. And if it's foreign to you, then it's going to be a limiting belief.
Yeah. So what would you say, like, who are the type of people that get into freight, or do you have to have trucking experience? Like, how long do people got to drive trucks before they can start freight brokering?
I mean, I don't think that anybody has to drive trucks before. Yeah. You just have to know the industry and be an expert, because what the customers are actually paying you for is to be an expert. So if they say, I need to have this cardboard shipped and it weighs 40,000 pounds, then you need to know to ask what the dimensions are, what the commodity is, what are the delivery times, so that you can really figure out what is the best mode of transportation and the most effective way to get your customer's shipment from point A to point Z.
Got you. So where I'm thinking about the person that's doing this, right? Like, I went to school for logistics before I switched, right? Yeah. So my question would be, like, when somebody gets into here, when you say you have to be the expert, what type of pre-existing knowledge, or how do you learn the knowledge? Do you have to get a logistics degree to do this, or like what's involved so you can learn all that stuff?
Yeah, and that's a good question. There's a lot of free resources, including YouTube. And obviously, I operate a school where I'm teaching people over 7 weeks with live coaching and all the resources that you need to be able to learn all of the individual modes of transportation, how to sell, so on and so forth, right? Because it's very nuanced. But no, it does not require a college degree. In fact, I would even say that a college degree might even slow you down in terms of being a successful freight broker, because a lot of the things, it's kind of like any other industry. Because the question that I pose to a lot of people who are college graduates is, in your current field, how much of the knowledge that you had when you were in the classroom are you actually applying to the field right now? Because it's like people have business degrees, but then they just go into sales. And then you realize that I didn't need to have this degree in order to do this job.
Yeah.
And then you're motivated, and then you're a sales dog, and then you're making 6 figures, and then people who are just relying on a degree are making entry-level pay because they don't actually have the skills that actually drive the revenue to the business.
Yeah, who would have a better chance just getting started in freight? And I don't say this to scare anybody away. Somebody who has been driving trucks for a while, or someone who is like has tons of sales experience? Like, who is the better fit?
I would probably say the person with the sales experience, just because they already have some of the prereqs to calling and some of the habits of repetition and resiliency. Because in freight brokerage, right, there's going to be times when customers are going to tell you no. And a part of being a salesman and even being a freight broker and being a 6-figure monthly freight broker is that you have to be resilient. Because on one hand, you have to be resilient enough to overcome objections, right? But then you also have to be so persistent and have the repetition to be able to continue doing it even when you have had success. Because what happens with customer 1 can't change what happens to customer 2 and 3, because while customer 1 might be a person that hangs up on me and is like, hey, never call here again.
Yeah.
Customer 2 might be a customer that nets me $25,000 a month. But if I get satisfied with customer 2, then customer 4 might be the same as 2, where they're another customer. But it's like, and that's my question to a lot of beginning freight brokers. I'm like, what has you so full? What success do you feel like that you have achieved that would make you feel so full that you don't have to continue working? And that complacency, a lot of top salespeople don't have that complacency because they don't know when to stop.
Got you. So this definitely seems like it's more like a high-powered sales type of position, or...
I think that high-powered sales can be a gift and a curse, because you have to really factor in that a lot of decision makers, they're just regular people. And so they'll be turned off by high-powered sales if you turn it on too hard, because really it's not necessarily that you have to be such a crazy salesman. You just have to be able to communicate and be able to kind of level with the customers and communicate with people on all different levels, because these people that work there, I mean, they're people a lot of times, they're entry-level employees. They're normal people. So, you kind of have to mask yourself. And so for me, my goal is always to be a consultant, right? Because it's much easier for me to sell beside you as opposed to selling in front of you. Because if I'm attacking it from the angle of me solving your problems, that's a much different conversation than me standing in front of you saying, hey, here, I'm trying to force feed you information.
Yeah. So what is it like when you talk about sales? What is this thing that I always hear, this load board? What exactly is that?
So a load board is basically a system that allows truckers to find available loads from brokers and dispatchers that have available loads in the area. So when these loads that are posted, they're posted all over the country, and it almost serves as a routing guide for all of the truckers that are trying to find work all around the country. So effectively, a trucker could use a load board and it could drive them all around the country, because you would have a dispatcher or a broker routing you around the country based on available loads.
So why couldn't a trucker who just dropped off a load just like open up his phone and say like, well, I'm headed back to Atlanta, let me just grab something real quick?
Because the way that the market works, depending on the state, it's what's called outbound. So, for instance, if you're going outbound California, you might not be able to find the same work. Or if you're in Florida, for instance, a better example, outbound Florida is tough for a lot of truckers. And so what happens is outbound Florida will be so cheap of a rate, right? So actually,
and why is it cheap?
Well, because here's the thing, right? So because it takes into account that you have already put your margin or put the extra fee on going inbound Florida, because you're going to be deadheading miles coming out of Florida.
Oh, because you're going down and there's nothing. It's
nothing
sea-locked.
to get you out of there. And so for instance, waterlocked, right?
Yeah.
And so, for instance, you could be going from Atlanta to, let's say, Miami,
yeah.
and the rate might be $2,000, but from Miami to Atlanta might be $800.
And they know that. And they're just like, somebody's going to get this load anyways. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And so that's a big part of being a successful freight broker, is knowing the market and knowing that that's a need. Because if you have outbound Florida freight, then you can be charging the same rate as inbound, because it's a precious commodity, right? And then if you have customers or if you have truckers that are going in, you can pair them with your outbound freight that you have and be able to charge for a round trip. And that's really where you start making your money and why you exist as a freight broker.
Got you. And then, so like kind of just touching back on that part where the animosity can be between like truckers and freight brokers.
Yeah.
I remember one time, I don't know if it was a client or whatever, and they were just like, man, you know, sometimes we pull up to the dock and the paperwork would be out and I'll see the freight broker made more money than me and he not even driving.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, and really, I would say that one of my big models is like, I could teach you to fish, but if I catch the fish and I have to put it on your plate and cook it, why wouldn't I be charging?
Right.
Because it does take time and effort for me to call and nurture the relationship with these customers. And so if I'm putting in the work to nurture the relationship with the customer, to continually call the customer every day, and then I'm just feeding this to you as an employee, right? Or as a subcontractor, then I have to be compensated also, because you're driving. You might, it sounds good to say like, oh, I would have gotten that money out of the load, but would you have truly known how to build the relationship? Would you have truly called the customer and been willing to talk to them about their daughter's soccer game and what their plans are for the weekend, and possibly followed them from company to company and built, a multi-year relationship so they're comfortable giving you all of their freight? Man, the answer's probably not, right?
Right.
Because you're like, well, this isn't paying me any money, so why would I do this? So a lot of times it's a situation where people can't see the forest for the trees, because what really allows you to be able to charge and be able to be a great partner to your customers is simply by having a good relationship and caring about them beyond just what the job is.
Mm-hmm. So a question I had as well is when you said like you got to be an expert, you got to know this and that, right?
Yeah.
So to the normal person, we know how to go to FedEx, get our ruler, measuring tape, and measure a box, right?
Yeah.
How does it work for freight when there's something that maybe, is this just trucks, or can stuff go by like, the containers that go over the sea, then they get to how do you figure all that out and price it and this and that? Because I always, like when I used to sell on eBay, if I had to put it in one of those crates, it was over with. It was like pickup only. On Facebook Marketplace, everyone always says pickup only because no one really knows how to ship, how to get the freight. Like, how does that work? You know what I mean?
Yeah, so it's all broken down by individual modes of transportation. And so a lot of times the rate is going to be higher based on the weight of the truck, the weight of the commodity, and also what it entails, right? And so you touched on the interesting thing when we were talking about the containers and import and export. And so I happen to be an expert on import and export and really the totality of that market. And so really you have to look at it from the standpoint of everything that you have, everything that you possess, everything that you drink, everything that you eat, everything that you have, that you wear, anything that you have in your house, it had to have gotten there somewhere, right? If you buy it from the store, it got there by way of a truck. And even if it originated in another country, ultimately it got here by truck, right? And so all of those things are very nuanced, and you have to know based on what the mode of transportation is, because it can fluctuate wildly. Right? Because in an import and export lane, I would be pricing my load based off of the round trip mileage as opposed to one way when we're doing like over the road or box truck or flatbed. And so the pricing will be remarkably different with import and export, or drayage is what we would call it.
What is drayage?
Drayage is import and export.
Okay.
So yes, import and export trucking.
Got you.
Yeah.
Got you. And then what about when you're moving, who does the measurements? Because you're remote, right?
Yeah.
You say you could work from the comfort of your home.
Yeah.
Like, how do you price this out off of just what they're telling you? What if their measurements are wrong? How is that, checked and balanced?
Well, so the thing is there's certain dimensions of what will actually fit on the truck. And then how many, because a lot of things you're going to ask things like, is it palletized, right? Is it palletized? Is it baled? How is it going to be loaded? Is it floor loaded? So you want to know all of these things, because based on that information, you'll be able to piece it together and make sense. Because, like, to give you an example, a standard pallet is probably 48 by 40 inches, right? Mm-hmm. And so if somebody says, and so if you know the dimensions of the truck and they say, I have 50 pallets that are going in.
You're like, that's not going to work.
It's not going to work. And then when they start talking about the height of it, and we're going to stack them 3 high, and it's 4 foot high. No, you're not. It's
that brings up a good question, though. So what about someone who does have a huge shipment?
Yeah.
Maybe it's something, which I'm thinking about the next question already, where it's like, a concert movement, right?
Yeah.
And there's multiple trucks that are needed.
Yeah.
How do you line up multiple trucks so that it gets there on time versus this guy's, what I'm saying, like towards a unit? How does that line up?
So the way that lines up is all with the freight broker and how they have it organized. So you would want to have it where the trucks are what's called staggered. So, you don't want to load your customer up all at one time, because you'll have what's called detention. And if your customers are, so if you're in your you would be charging customers. So you have a standard amount of time, which would be 60 minutes or 2 hours. Mm-hmm. And after 2 hours, you'd be charged $60 per hour in import and export. And it's probably $35 an hour when you're talking about over the road, right?
Yeah.
So it can fluctuate. But you want to make sure that you stagger the trucks to make sure that the receiver has appropriate time to be able to load and unload the cargo, so that you're not force feeding and delivering additional accessorial charges outside of what you quoted them.
Yeah.
And so it's all about finding the right trucks, and then
would that be the same company though? Like, if I had so many pallets, I needed 2 trucks.
Yeah.
Do you go this company and that company, we're both going to get it there? Or do you find someone who has multiple available trucks?
I probably would find somebody that has multiple available trucks. If it's import and export, I would probably use the same trucker.
Yeah.
But it really.
And when you say trucker, that doesn't mean just the person. That means the company.
That means multiple companies.
Yeah.
But really, and if you look at it from a drayage standpoint, sometimes companies will have 3 trucks. Sometimes companies will have 50 trucks. Mm-hmm. So it really is a case-by-case basis based on how many trucks they have, what the distance is, because they might be able to just have a situation where they're just dropping the load off and then coming back or going and putting and in-gating the container and then getting loaded again, and then, being able to complete multiple runs in the same day.
So what about where are you on the hook at when your truck doesn't get there on time?
Oh, I'm completely on the hook when the truck doesn't get there on time.
Yeah.
Because what happens is to the customer, you're the trucker. To the trucker, you're the customer. Because I'm paying the trucker and the customer is paying me. And so most of the time, the customer doesn't even have any communication with the trucker whatsoever. They might know who the trucker is, but it's only because they see on the paperwork what trucker that was there. But many times it'll have who the broker is on there. So my customer doesn't have any relationship with the individual trucker. If my truck that I contracted is not there, that's completely on me.
What happens?
Well, I mean, you could get fired.
Yeah.
Right? You can be fired and be replaced. And so that's really a big part of why.
How do you put that fire out? Because can you see where he's at on the GPS or something?
Yeah. So you can require tracking on a lot of the loads. They have a lot of software like trucker tools where they download an app on the phone and the customer can see in real time. But again, that varies based on mode, because, like, for instance, with drayage, import and export, the lanes are going to be dedicated, where it's going to be the same trucker doing the same lane every single day. And a lot of times it's the same guy, and he's picking it up there because he lives near the plant and it's easy for him to do it. And then he can complete multiple runs in a day when you have the dedicated lanes.
I was just about to ask you that. Like, we have a client that, we run his coaching business and all that. Yeah. And he does the box trucks, and he always talks about dedicated lanes.
Yeah.
And in my head, I always I know this is not what it is, but I always saw like, oh, when you pull up, it says his name on that lane. Yeah. What does dedicated lane mean?
Dedicated lane means that it is that the lane is a consistent lane that is going every single day. Mm-hmm. Like for instance, right?
So it's not like the lane at the back of the warehouse when you see Amazon has 50 lanes and it's like that's his
lane.
No.
Gotcha. It would be as if like what you said with the clothing business. If you had a distribution center that was, let's say, in Austell, because we're in Atlanta right now. Yeah. If it was in Austell and you knew that you had to take the clothes there every single day, that would be a dedicated lane.
Got you. What's the power of a dedicated lane?
Oh, I mean, for a trucker, they can scale their business off of having a dedicated lane because they know what the carrier or what their driver is getting paid. They know what the lane is paying, and then they can really figure out what the volume, if the volume is increasing. So a lot of truck drivers or a lot of trucking companies, the reason why they went out of business in this most recent freight recession is because they were relying on dedicated lanes, right? And so imagine this, if you have a customer like, let's say, Publix, right? And they have a dedicated lane that's going from Atlanta to their distribution center in, let's say, Chattanooga, right? And I'm getting paid $1,000 for every move, $1,000. And then they're like, okay, well, I have more loads now. I'm having more loads. And I say, okay, well, I'm going to buy another truck. Yeah. And I'm scaling my business based on me thinking that I'm going to get $1,000 per load, right? And then I'm like, oh, the driver only makes $20 an hour. Bingo, bango. As a trucking company, I have $500 profit per truck per day, let's say per run. But then the market flips, right? And then what I was getting paid $1,000, and then here comes the big bad broker again. I'm looking at the market and I see that, hey, they could be paying $700. I could get this done for $600, and I could be charging a customer $750. I'm cold calling the distribution center. I'm cold calling Publix, and they're paying $1,000, and I can come in and do it for them for $700. Mm-hmm. So they have a $300 savings multiplied by however many loads that they have going in that lane. So now the market flips, and so the trucker who has scaled their business based on them thinking that they're going to get $1,000 forever or for that period of time, now they're in trouble. Mm-hmm. They're in trouble because now they're losing. So now their profit could be all of that margin that I am saving or all that margin that I'm taking by quoting them based on the current market conditions. And that's the peril of having a dedicated contracted lane as opposed to pricing it based on the market, based on the spot market.
Is there any difference for the freight broker? Like one of our clients that we run his coaching business for does the box trucks. Yeah. But then, what you're talking about a lot is like 18-wheelers. Like, is there any favor or is it still just transportation?
See, a lot of people, and it really depends on your customers. Sometimes it's based on like the volume. So I have a lot of recycling customers. And so a lot of times they will never use a box truck just simply because all of the viability of their deals is predicated on them being able to get a certain weight in the truck and a certain volume. And so they're never really going to be shipping 1,000 pounds. They're going to be shipping 40 and 44,000 pounds just because that's how their business works. Right. And so from a broker standpoint, every broker has their preference, right? And it's like, we'll go back to when I'm telling you that you have to be an expert. Like a lot of brokers, they make the mistake, and rookie brokers make the mistake of trying to do every mode. Because you can't do every single mode the best. Like you're not going to be the best at over-the-road trucking and be the best at cross-border Mexican and be the best at less than truckload and be the best at import and export, just simply because that's not the case. And even if you think of it in terms of a doctor, no doctor is going to be the best at heart surgery and lung surgery and knee surgery and foot surgery. Right. Because you imagine if you went in and you needed, let's say, a knee operation, and they say, oh, I'm the best at knees, I'm the best at heart, I'm the best at lungs, I'm the best at skin, I'm the best at brain. Yeah. You're like, how?
Yeah. Yeah. So a question I had too, like I was hearing you're talking about just like sales, right? Yeah. Because on the outside, people may look at it like, okay, I'm going to get on this low board and I'm just going to make sales, right? Yeah. What is the sales process? What's a day look like in freight brokering for people who may be thinking about this, you know? and we'll go from there.
Yeah, so a day as a freight broker, a lot of times is spent in your CRM, your customer relation management tool, and your TMS, which was going to be your transportation management system, because you need to know like what loads you have going out, what updates are required to go to your customer, and then ultimately you need to be managing whether or not the loads are booked and what you're paying the driver, what their status is, and then coupled with figuring out your prospecting and whether or not you are going on, if you're doing customer acquisition that day. And so what a normal day looks like in the freight broker is a combination of all those things. In the morning, I'm going to be catching up my loads. I'm going to be touching base with my customers. I'm looking at what I have going out the day and get my day organized. And as those loads start to deliver and as everything is materializing for the day, I might then begin to be prospecting, writing down the clients, doing cold calls, touching base with new customers to see what new loads that I can get, and really just touching base with all of these customers to try to get more loads for tomorrow, next day, next week.
How does it look? Because what I'm about to ask you is, how does it look from a small business side, whether that's entrepreneurial, working for a small company versus someone that is like a huge company, right? Like, you see in Atlanta, these huge logistics companies, which really just probably a lot of freight broker and sales. Yeah. What is that day-to-day difference, or just what is the difference between having that huge support system versus the mom and pop?
And so when you're dealing with the mom and pops, a lot of times what you'll see is you'll have a higher commission split, because sometimes with the smaller brokerages, because they don't have the budget to necessarily put together an entire team, you'll be doing what's called cradle to the grave. And what cradle to the grave means, and it's just an industry term, it means that I find the customer, I find the truck, I book the truck, I communicate with the customer, and then I close the load for my accounting. And so all of those things and all those processes and all those individual tasks that I just described are all going to be things that are manned by jobs with a larger brokerage. So in a larger brokerage, you're going to have somebody who's booking the truck for you. Like, I'll just tell you, I have Atlanta.
Yeah, like tell me when you work corporate versus like when you started doing it like entrepreneurial.
Yeah, so when you're working corporate, a big part of it is that you're really hands off. The only thing you have to do is just that one thing. Yeah. We only want you going out and getting customers. And so I would just say like, oh, well, I have Chicago to Byron, Wisconsin, and I have $900 in the load. I submit it, and then I have a carrier sales team that is going to take inbound calls and call and book that load at the maximum profit.
It's like a conveyor belt system happening.
Conveyor belt system.
Versus mom and pop, you're handling top to bottom.
Right. And then the next part of that is like I would have an account manager. So like a lot of times, like once I onboard a customer, because I'm a hunter, like I'm the person that they call in that says, hey, we have a lead with Home Depot, go get it. Right? We have a lead with Anheuser-Busch, go get it. Yeah. Bring us home. And I'm the guy that brings us home. Gotcha. But then I might price it, and then I might establish the relationship, but then I'm handing it off to an account manager who's going to manage the day-to-day. And I manage the relationship with, for lack of better terms, the higher-ups with the company, while making sure that I'm supervising the ins and outs and the day-to-day of the operation with the account managers and so on and so forth.
So kind of we're talking about sales, right? We're talking about sales. We're talking about load board, all of this. Yeah. How do you get business when it's like, because in my head, right? Yeah. What I'm looking at is I put out that I need this job to transport this product from A to Z. Yeah. There's probably going to be 100 people that jump on it, and then I'm just looking at who's got the cheapest price. Yeah. Break down that limiting belief for the person who's just like, I'm not big enough to offer the lowest price, so how could I ever compete?
Yeah, well, a lot of it is really you have to change your mindset, because you have customers that don't care about price. Like I have customers that don't care about price. They care about the service and it getting there in one piece, right? I mean, so I'll give you an example. For customers that have expensive commodities and they have things that are time sensitive, or they have a commodity that can be compromised based on the time that it's out, such as a seafood or even pharmaceuticals that need to be maintained at a certain temperature, they don't have the luxury of going with the cheapest person.
Because they can't lose that load.
They can't lose that load. So if you think about it, even in terms of just like frozen shrimp, right? Some of these containers that come in, there'll be 50,000 pounds of frozen shrimp. So even if you look at the retail cost of shrimp, like let's say it's $5 a pound. If you have a 50,000 pound load of shrimp and it is $5 a pound, that's $250,000 worth of shrimp. And we're not even talking about just them having it delivered to the grocery store. We're talking about it impacting every single part of it, because everybody can relate to going to the grocery store and something's on sale and it says, sorry, we're out of stock of this. How are they out of stock of this?
Yeah.
Like, what is going on?
Right.
And so then if it's out of stock, then, okay, well, I need to have chicken or I need to have shrimp. What am I going to do? I'm going to go to another store.
Yeah.
So if Publix is out of it, then I'm like, all right, well, I guess I just got to go to Kroger.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's a big part of it. And so Publix doesn't have the luxury of just basing it off of price, because the opportunity cost of them
not having it available
is much greater
Yeah.
than whatever $100 or $50 they might have saved.
Yeah. I mean, here's kind of just a pick in the brain question when
Yeah.
you think about, like, when you see these trucks going by,
Yeah.
and I know it's a wide variety, you always think of like heavy equipment, right?
Yeah.
But like, what's in here? Like, cause like even some of these silver trucks that are
Yeah.
like cylinder, I didn't know that like they're carrying milk.
Yeah.
You just always think it's gas or something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
like, break down like the hidden things that are behind those metal walls,
I mean, a lot of times you never know what the commodity is.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had
Commodity is what's moving.
commodity is what's moving. I mean, I've had coworkers that were bidding on NASA, bidding on delivering the space shuttle, right?
Yeah.
Because you really have to think about it. Every single thing that exists has to be everybody has a supply chain, and it has to be.
Would that space
delivered.
shuttle be like open, or would it be like hidden in the truck?
Oh, it'd be open.
That's what I was thinking.
Giant. I
Yeah.
mean, multiple axles. Like, it's
Yeah.
going to be police escorts, and not to mention, you're going to have the DOT routing and the whole thing based on the size and
Yeah.
a lot of things like that.
Crazy.
But I mean, a lot of that stuff, you wouldn't even think about it. I mean, like some things that are being transported. I mean, like manure, right? I mean, that manure is being delivered from point A to point B for farmers.
Yeah.
So the farmers have to have certain things for their equipment, right? And to be able to operate their farm. And then their outbound is whatever the commodity or the food is that they're producing, or the meat that they're producing.
So a question I would have is, when you get to big stuff that has police escorts and DOTs like the space shuttle, is that reserved for a certain caliber, or can like anybody kind of compete for that?
Anybody can compete for that, but it goes back to being an expert, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and really, when you look at what the stakes are of that load not delivering, if you can't do it, you should not be bidding on it.
Yeah.
Because number one, your company is going to probably have to have additional insurance and additional liability that you're going to be responsible for. And if your company doesn't have millions of dollars stashed away, and you make a mistake that costs your company $1 million, your company could be going out of business off of one of these loads. If you are a small
next day.
if you're a small broker, and I only have $100,000 of liability, and I have a mistake that costs $500,000 or $700,000, we're out of business. Simply, we're out of business. We can't afford to pay it.
Yeah, that quick.
Just that quick.
So let's like bring it back.
Yeah.
Right. So, well, actually, before we go there, would an Amazon, Home Depot, but mainly I see you have Amazon.
Yeah.
Is all their freight brokers going to be like in-house?
No, they use brokers. Because I mean, the totality of their supply chain is so giant, right?
Yeah.
I mean, because you got to think a lot of their stuff is from China, right? And so the freight forwarder is going to be delivering it or the freight forwarder is going to be booking the
What's that word you're saying, freight forwarder?
Freight forwarder. So what a freight forwarder does is it books space on the steamship lines or the ocean vessels. So if I give you the scope of what supply chain actually looks like, right? And so when you look at the tag of like a TV, or you look at your clothes and it says made in China, there's one or two ways that it's going to get here. It's either going to get here by train, or it's either going to get here by airplane, or it's going to get here by boat, right?
Yeah.
And so if it gets here by boat, it's going to come here on the port, which means that the container, it's arriving on an ocean container, and it needs to be pulled from the port and taken to that distribution center where it will be unloaded and then distributed around the country from the distribution center.
Gotcha.
And so the totality of their supply chain is so grand that they never could truly eliminate brokers, because if they eliminate, because again, it makes more sense for them to pay that margin as opposed to hire somebody at $80,000 a year who might have a bunch of a downtime, because you are increasing your chances of inefficiencies.
The more you talk about this too, I would assume that this is one of those like necessity businesses that can't tank, because I'm even thinking during the pandemic, like grocery stores couldn't stop. You know, a lot of stuff stopped. Yeah. But water still had to get delivered. Yeah. Food still had to get to a grocery store.
100%.
So freight brokers were still working.
Freight brokers are still working. And like I said, I mean, it's a recession-proof industry. And simply because people always need goods. Yeah. People always need clothes. People always need bathroom supplies. There are certain things that no matter what happens, so long as humans are existing on this planet, that they're going to have to need to be able, or have to be able to use, based on just being a human being. And that's food, drink, things like that, clothing, the bare necessities.
Someone told me they're like, you may think it's a recession, but let those trucks start running, and you'll really see a recession.
Oh,
you know what I mean?
You'll see beyond a recession.
Yeah,
you'll start looking like that, like apocalypse.
Yeah, because it's like, if you think like, and it's crazy too, because like we just see trucks on the highway, and we're just like, oh my gosh, this truck's on my way, but we're not thinking like these trucks are running the world. You know what I mean? Like, and it's so many people involved, from the driver to the company to that, but like we're not thinking about like, even though it's most likely not, but in the sense it is, it's like that truck is carrying your next whatever.
It's carrying your next whatever. Everything is all good until all of the stores are out of toilet paper or out of water or out of meat. Yeah. And then the price is doubled because there's scarcity in the trucking market. Like, people don't really think about that when they cut off trucks.
Yeah. So with trucks being such a necessity, and I know you're on the freight brokering side, what kind of changed during that time to when I remember everybody wanted to actually own the trucking company to where it was just like, oh, trucking business is doing bad? Was it really just the cost of gasoline and diesel and all that stuff?
No. So what happened was the trucking market itself is extremely cyclical, where it has ebbs and flows. And so you literally have a peak where you see, and this is how the industry experts actually track and how they project what the pricing per mile and what the cost of trucking is actually going to be. Because you can literally see how many truckers are entering the market, and then in the tender rejection rate. So you can see how many truckers are actually entering the market, and then when truckers are exiting the market. So when the market is bad, what we would call a tighter market, you can see the truckers exiting the market, right? Because when there's too many trucks on the road, the rates are down, and people can't afford to be able to keep their trucks on the road. Because it goes back to that example of what I was saying, when the trucking company A was going from Atlanta to Chattanooga, and they were getting $1,000 per load. Yeah. And then there's so many trucks on the road that the trucker says, hey, when a competing trucker says, hey, like, look, like, if they're doing it for $1,000, I'll do it for $600. I'm just trying to survive. Yeah. And so the big trucker, with all of the overhead and the whole staff and everything else, and the huge accounting firm and the multiple office buildings, they can't afford to be able to go that far down in pricing. And so they're relying on a healthy trucking market to be able to survive and for their business to be viable.
Got you. And then the good part, though, just to kind of bring it down to earth, is the freight broker never has to worry about finding drivers to actually drive the truck. Of course, they're looking at it from the top layer, but they're not finding Tim to drive this truck. They don't have to worry about any of that, right?
None of that.
Because what I want to do is, I know what we've been talking is a lot of high level things.
Yeah.
How does this become accessible for somebody who is looking for a career change and wants to do this? Because I want to level set it to where they're not like, oh, I'm not smart enough to do that.
Yeah, well, because it's really as simple as, and a lot of people don't really understand this limiting belief that you think that you have to have a college degree, or you have to have this extensive licensure from the state, like insurance or real estate. And that's just simply not the case, right? Yeah. I mean, even if you have a criminal record and a felonious background, that will not stop you from being able to do this trade. So I just would preface my statement in saying that. But it's literally as simple as finding a local company that needs to have shipments, you have a truck, and then and you're able to book their shipments for them.
Got you. And that's where I wanted to pivot and talk about the Freight Broker Business Academy.
Yeah.
Because my question is, how do I find customers? Like, I know, let's say I can roll my sleeves up, I can sell.
Yeah.
How do I find customers? How do I make this make sense so that if I get started, I can actually supplement or replace my income?
And and it's as simple as looking down at the fruit that you're eating. Mm-hmm. It's as simple as looking at the clothes that you're wearing.
Yeah.
It's as simple as looking at the water bottle that you're drinking out of.
Yeah.
They ship.
Gotcha.
Clearly, because you have the water bottle in your hand.
Right.
So
Right.
It got here somehow.
Yeah.
It's not.
But they got to be connected to the big dogs. I'm just a little small fry.
Yeah, but not necessarily. And a lot of times they want to work with smaller companies and smaller customers because their company might not be huge and they may have a bad experience. So when you deal with a lot, and this goes back to your question when you're talking about working for the big brokerages as opposed to mom and pops. A lot of those big brokerages have already worked with the who's who of the shipping industry and have already gotten kicked out. There's bad blood, and they're never working with them again.
Yeah.
Right? And so that is a very common thing in the industry. And so that leaves space for smaller brokers to be able to go in and work with a Coca-Cola or be able to go in and work with, a Walmart. Because when you specialize in something, you're always going to beat the people who are masters of everything.
Why wouldn't Coca-Cola, Anheuser-Busch just have all their own freight brokers? It just seems like an expense that
because it's expensive. I mean, because people require that you make. I mean, an entry level freight broker probably makes $60,000 to $80,000 a year.
Yeah,
entry level. So Anheuser-Busch, I mean, they have 50,000 exports that go out per year, 60,000 exports that go out per year. So they have a logistics team of people that are managing their freight and are dealing with freight brokers, but they would never hire their own freight brokers because it would never make sense. They just hire people that know how to manage their operation to be able to procure truckers and to be able to manage their transportation operation.
Got you. So inside of Freight Broker Business Academy, I know multiple people. I'm just acting as if I'm them. Yeah. They're like, I need more time with family. Yeah. I need more time to be at home. And this job that I'm at right now is requiring me to be present, right? Yeah. How do you see them finding their success in this? Because it's foreign. Yeah. They may be a great salesperson at AT&T. Yeah. How do they find their success when they come through your program? What do you teach them? Yeah. What are, your path, their roadmap, all of that? So
it always starts with education, right? It starts on education because people need to find what they're most passionate about. I mean, and so one of my favorite tactics is for them to figure out what the student is most passionate about, because the things that you're most passionate about, you'll be able to have easy conversation. So let's say you are interested in,
sports shoes.
Yeah, sports shoes. Let's just say you're interested in Nikes, right?
Yeah.
If you talk to, and this is, I like to go more specific, but let's just say Nike.
Dog food.
Let's say you love that you use Purina dog food.
Yeah.
And the veterinarian said that the reason why your dog has been so healthy is because you've been using Purina dog food, right?
Right.
What do you think the conversation will look like if you called a logistics manager at Purina and you're talking to them about that before you even start mentioning freight? You're going to build rapport, right? I mean, because a lot of times people that work for those companies, anybody that works for a company, especially in corporate America, they always think that the job that they have is the most important job in the entire company, right?
Right.
And so if I call you and you work for Purina and I'm talking to you about the dog food, I'm like, man, this dog food is great for my animal. This happened, that my dog's coat is amazing. That the veterinarian said that this saved my dog's life because he's been eating this food the whole time. Mm-hmm. They're like, man, that is a crazy story. They're like, man, this is great. I have to tell my manager about this because they're excited. Because a lot of times people's identity is based on where they work. And so they think that Purina is better than Blue Buffalo. And so if you're telling them a story like that, they're like, I knew that it was better than Blue Buffalo. And this just reaffirms what I'm saying.
Right.
Because people have pride in the companies that they work for.
Right. Yeah. So then with that, though, is there like some type of like report card that shows like, do they try to say, well, let me see your past like history of like loads or like what's the referral system in here so that, okay, you seem like a great person, but how can I trust you?
A lot of times it'll be in what's called a discovery call, where they'll ask you like, what is it that you specialize in and what can you do for my company?
Yeah.
And you can't, this is not an industry where you can fake it.
Yeah.
You can fake it for a little bit, but when it comes time for you to deliver, you can't fake it.
Yeah.
Because there's going to be certain terminology and certain processes that they expect you to know. That they're not going to walk you through. So if you don't know basic things like what is proof of delivery, what is a bill of lading, what is truck order not used, what is detention, what is lumper fee, those are all going to be things that will be giant red flags. Those are going to be things that are going to be huge red flags. And so if you don't know very, very basic things, they're not going to work with you. You'll be exposed as an imposter because they have to know, and they will make sure that you're somebody who's trusted to be able to handle their freight.
Gotcha.
Because it's not just the commodity. It's their whole supply chain that's at stake. I mean, you have companies that will staff employees to be able to receive an influx of trucks. So imagine a company staffing 50 people to unload trucks, and then trucks don't arrive, and then you're the broker on the other side, and you've been lying saying that these trucks are on the way. Imagine what that impact has on that company, right?
Huge.
So they need to know that you're trusted, and that goes back to when I say like, it's not always about price, it's about service. Because a customer chasing $100 in saving could lose their company thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
Not just in that, but in reputation.
Right.
Chasing a cheaper trucker.
Yeah.
And so as a higher up, they're like, well, how could you make this mistake? Like, because you wanted to save us $100. you want to save us $100 and it cost us our biggest account.
Yeah, exactly. So what's the curriculum look like for Freight Broker Business Academy?
So I have it broken down into multiple steps, and I made it as comprehensive as I possibly could because my experience comes from working and training freight brokers and junior freight brokers are people that are coming out of college, people that are switching careers, and really just anybody who's interested in getting into the industry. So the curriculum starts with what is freight brokerage, right? The basics. What is freight brokerage? What are the different business models of freight brokerage? How does a freight broker make money? What do they do? What are examples of freight brokerage? Then we move to the modes of transportation. What is expedited? What is less than truckload? What is import export? What are the terminologies that you need to know to be able to be successful in this particular mode, right? And then we go in my favorite part is it goes into customer acquisition. Who is the delivery? How do I prospect? How do I put together my sales cycle? What does the total sales cycle look like? What am I trying to sell them when I get on the phone? What is the person looking for? What is the gatekeeper or the decision maker looking for in order to onboard me as a trucker? And those are all questions that I answer because the answer's different based on the vertical of trucking that you are going after, the vertical of what commodity that you're going for, that you're working with.
And what about like the hands-on training that I saw like on your website?
Oh, man, it's all hands-on.
Okay, so this isn't no like just do it myself type of situation.
Well, I offer do it yourself because I understand that not everybody has $1,000 to put into live training, or maybe they're not at the point in their sales cycle, right, where they are ready for hands-on one-on-one training. So I think that really one of the big things of what my academy is based off of is accessibility, right? Because my motto is always to give you way more than I ever take from you. And so I do have accessible pricing where it's DIY, where it's as low as getting 5 ebooks with a transportation ebook, where you can just consume this information at whatever pace you want to without having to spend a ton of money, right? But then you also have a DIY, which includes the ebooks, that is just the course where you have lifetime access and you can consume it at your own pace. But if you are the person who is really interested in getting in the industry, then you have to go through coaching. Because if you want to run a marathon, you need to have somebody who has run 50 marathons to be able to teach you how to do it.
Yeah. So what would you say to, as we conclude, like looking in the camera, what would you say to somebody who's on the edge or thinking about this, but they have doubts and they need that push? Why would freight brokering be an excellent option for them to switch to?
So freight brokering is going to be an excellent option for a couple reasons. Number one, it's low barrier entry. It's very low barrier entry. You don't have to have a college degree. You don't have to have a clean criminal record. You don't have to have experience in logistics. You don't have to have any of those things. The only thing that you need to have is computer and a source of internet, and just the attitude to be willing to win. And then number two, it's a recession-proof industry. It is not going anywhere. There's always going to be a need for freight brokers. There's always going to be trucks on the road. So long as we as humans are here in America and we need things to eat and things to drink, things to sleep on, and homes to live in, is always going to be a need, because the network of people who own these companies will never be able to connect with all of the individual people who own trucks. So there's always a job for you. And this is a skill. It's like riding a bike. The best thing that I can always tell people is that if you know how to broker freight and how to acquire customers, you will acquire the skill to be able to get it back in 3 months, regardless of what your circumstances are.
That's what's up. Tell people where they can find you, where they can connect with you at, just so like if they're interested in Freight Brokering Business Academy, how that could work.
So I have a ton of free content on Instagram. I am Victor Mason. I have a ton of free content, and a lot of it is all based around things that I know about the industry, so that you can really take the information in small doses. And I give you a lot of free game, right? I'm always, like I said, I'm trying to give you more than I take from you always, right? So I am Victor Mason, and you can go to www.freightbrokerbusinessacademy.com. I have a free training where I'm explaining about the industry. And you can always book a call with me and my team, and we're always happy to talk to you about what your career goals are, how we can make it happen, and what the viability of your goals are, and in what time frame, right? Because this is a skill that you need to know. And truthfully, this has been an industry that has been gatekept for so long. And a lot of people in minority communities, they truly don't understand that this is something that they could have been doing the entire time, right? And so I look at it from, and especially even in the Black community, where people are always hustlers. They're always looking for the next hustle. This is your hustle, right? You don't, whatever illicit activities that you're doing, if you take that same mindset that you have with that and you apply to this, you'll be a millionaire.
And what's your Instagram, TikTok, Facebook?
I am Victor Mason. Victor Mason.
They can find everything right there.
I am Victor Mason.
That's what's up, y'all. So if you are interested in a career shift, you're trying to find something that you can attach to, this is something that you can do from the comfort of your home. I've actually witnessed, the people that have came through there. Freight brokering, something that you probably thought was for like only the big dogs, only huge companies, are actually coming from people just like you that are sitting at their home, creating these sales and moving these trucks. So click everything in the link in the description below so that you can check out the Freight Broker Business Academy. We want to thank you, Victor, for joining on the show. And we just can't wait to see all the success of the people that get started in freight brokering.
Let's go.
We'll see y'all in the next episode. Peace.